What do we know about the range of Iranian missiles? Because they said IRGC has announced that if the war starts, it's not gonna be a regional war. It's gonna go beyond the region. And yesterday I was talking with my, the experts and the friends we have on this podcast. There were some sort of doubts. What are the range? What is the range of Iranian missiles, and how are they going to be able to increase that range? And because we know, by the way, that the former supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, because of his policy, his strategy, he said we have to be limited to, for example, this a particular range for the missiles. But right now, what do we know about that? Is that going to change because of this war of aggression against Iran? And they know that they're using the American bases in Romania, Germany, Greece, and other countries. They're using these bases against Iran.
Yeah, I think that when they say that Iran is going to respond beyond, its response is going to go beyond the region, I think that is definitely it's going to happen. And I don't know whether like Iran will strike Diego Garcia or something like that. I mean, in these far off places, the Americans are much more vulnerable because their assets are not well protected. They're out there in the open. So Iran, if a few missiles hit somewhere far off, then they could do a lot of damage to the United States. But also, Iran's allies in the region are now much more prepared. Yemen is very prepared for war, and the Iraqi resistance is prepared to escalate far beyond what it did last time round. And as I said, the Iranian military capabilities are much stronger than they were 3 months ago. So it'll be devastating, and it will not go well for the United States or the Israeli regime or their regional proxies. And there's no way that the Americans are going to be able to carry out some type of limited war and get away with it, or have the Iranians respond in a way which would please the United States. The Iranians will strike back in a way in which it suits their interests. This is a broad anti-Iranian coalition. It's a broad coalition against the axis of resistance. It's a broad coalition against uh, the free people of the region, the Iranians, Yemen, Iraq, the Iraqi resistance, Hezbollah, the Palestinians, and Iran will deal with it both regionally and beyond. Also, there are other things that can be contemplated about global energy markets. I mean, with the technologies that exist today, the production of oil could easily be stopped outside of this region. I mean, the Republic of Azerbaijan is one place, but that's closer to home. But you can envisage places which are under U.S. occupation or taken hostage by the United States, or Libya, uh, or other places where the United States and the West, they have major interests which could be targeted. I I have no idea what this could mean, but in today's world, when the Israeli regime carries out assassinations uh, from thousands of kilometers away, or they bomb targets by flying over multiple countries, I think that it's when the Americans and the Israelis have created uh, a jungle and are imposing the law of the jungle, then they shouldn't expect others not to respond in kind.
When you talk about we may reach some sort of agreement, is this agreement some sort of document about the preconditions for the next round of negotiations? What is that? Because many people are arguing there is no negotiations going on. There is no active talks between the two parties. We have Pakistan sending messages, giving the American message to Iranian and taking the Iranian message and deliver it to the American. What is that, and what do we know about? Let's assume they reach some sort of positive outcome. What is that positive outcome?
Well, yes, you're right. There are no negotiations. There's no direct communications. They're just letters. The Pakistanis are not uh, doing much more than sending the letters back and forth. What I'm hearing is that the Americans are showing some flexibility, but not nearly enough. So there's no reason to believe that there will be a big breakthrough at all. And it could be that tomorrow morning at this time we may be at war. Maybe tonight we may be at war. Maybe the day after. After all, this is a 3-day weekend, and they like starting wars during weekends. A 3-day weekend in the United States because Memorial Day is on Monday. So this may be this may be the time that and we know that the United States loves carrying out wars while they're negotiating in the hope of uh like on both occasions when they launched the 12-day war, they were negotiating with Iran, and the negotiations were just, it turned out, were just a ploy. They just wanted to uh make the Iranians think that there won't be war. Then before this war, we were negotiating and there was progress. And the foreign minister of Oman went to the United States saying that there was significant progress. And then they launched the war. And then after the war, we had the ceasefire. And the Americans, instead of abiding by the ceasefire, they impose a blockade on Iranian ports. And the Israelis, of course, are carrying out genocidal attacks against Lebanese civilians as we speak. So negotiations with the United States don't necessarily mean anything. And messages being sent back and forth through the Pakistanis don't necessarily mean anything either. As I said, we could wake up tomorrow morning and war will have started, despite the fact that we're hearing that the Americans are showing some flexibility. Maybe they're showing flexibility so to fool Iran into thinking that war is off the table. But that's not going to work. The Iranians are 100% prepared for war. And their working assumption is that there will be war. That is the working assumption. The assumption is that there will be war. It's a given. Now, if the negotiations get anywhere, fine. But they're planning for war. But if there is going to be an agreement, the Iranians are not going to be very flexible. Why? Because they won the war. They're the victim. They have the upper hand. And in the siege warfare, the Americans have used a double-edged sword. Yes, they besieged Iran, but they besieged the global economy now for almost 3 months too. And the global economy, from what we are hearing, is weeks away from the crisis exploding. And some say it could be at the beginning of June. Some say the middle of June. Of course, it's a process. It's not like one day everything becomes clear, but things are going to deteriorate rapidly from what we're hearing from people in the know. And that is the reason why the Americans have such a sense of urgency. As I said earlier, the Americans want an agreement now. The Iranians are, today. The Iranians are saying, no, 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 we have to do this properly. The Iranians are in no rush. So obviously, the Americans have reasons why they're in such a rush. I don't think that I don't think there will be a comprehensive agreement, but there could be a partial agreement. And there are ways in which Iran can be flexible. I mean, without compromising its principles. I mean, Iran is not going to give up nuclear enrichment. It's not going to accept this uh, long period of time where they don't enrich uranium or anything like that. But it's not going to give up control of the Strait of Hormuz. It's not going to give up its sovereignty. It's not going to give up its demands for reparations and the removal of sanctions. There's some ways in which I could conceive it being uh, uh, flexible. I mean, for example, Iran is going to get take fees or get fees for the Strait of Hormuz. Does it have to announce it and make a big deal out of it? No, not necessarily. There are ways of doing these things with while you can create make it lessen sensitivity. there are ways that some things can be done. But again, at the end of the day, it's going to be the Americans who are going to have to give the concessions, not the Iranians. The Iranians can give token concessions. They can make some tactical uh, changes to give Trump an off ramp, but they're not going to change. Why? They won the war. They have the upper hand on siege warfare, and the Iranians have the Strait of Hormuz. The Americans want it open. The Iranians are saying it was open. You close it, and if it's going to be normal, then things have to be normal for us too. And so the Iranians they're the ones with the power. And Iranian people are patient. A lot of people have great expectations in Iran. The government has to take that into account. Some expectations are unrealistic, in my opinion. Some people, they're demanding unconditional surrender or something like that from the Americans. But it's important that the government has to show that they were able to. I don't like using the term cash in, but they were able to use this opportunity to change the equation, and I'm confident that they will be able to do that. But again, we make up. If I was a betting man, and thank God I'm not, I would not bet on a deal.
Yeah. Yesterday, all GCC countries together condemn Iranian new mechanism for the Strait of Hormuz. And is that a political posture? And behind the scene, there's somehow they have no choice but agreeing with Iran's new sort of strategy for the Strait of Hormuz, new mechanism, by the way, new system, the toll system that they have in place. And the other point is, Professor Marandi, yeah, last night we know that the Qatari delegation was in Tehran. What was the main reason for that? Is that a communication between Iran and GCC countries?
Well, I don't know the details of that, and so I shouldn't speculate. Uh, I, from what I've been from what I've read, not told. I haven't been told. From what I've read, it has to do with the negotiations. So, but whether I haven't read that they representing a broader. I mean, the five countries that helped the Americans attack Iran, there are major differences between them right now. And well, they can condemn all they like. They they thought that they could get away with murder. They were with the Americans. They facilitated the war. They funded the war. They killed our people. And, pretending that they were neutral is just an insult to our intelligence. No one believes it. That's why across the region, people were cheering Iran when Iran was striking these regimes in retaliation. Because they know. Everyone knows. And the only people who weren't cheering were the Wahhabis and the Salafis and the Takfiris who are all on the payroll. And others who are on the payroll. Otherwise, everyone, people were cheering. Why? Because they know that these regimes, where they stand and who they are, and they're each is worse, as they say in Persian, each is worse than the next, as the yiki az yiki badtar. One is worse than the other, or whatever, however that would be translated. So. There's they can complain all they want, but the status of the Strait of Hormuz is never going to go back to where it was before, and there's nothing that they can do about it. Absolutely nothing. They should have refrained from killing Iranians. They thought, and remember, before we were hearing that they were against the war before the war started, but then it turned out that they were not actually against the war. Now some of them are because they paid a heavy price. And they know that if the war restarts, that could be the end of their regimes. I mean, if Iran destroys Qatar's gas facilities and wrecks them completely, then Qatar is nothing. If Iran destroys the critical infrastructure of any of these countries, it could do it swiftly, and it would bring an end to these countries. So now they think differently, except for the Emirates, whose leader is firmly in the Netanyahu camp, which is actually a good thing for Iran because the more they're associated with Israel, the more popular Iran becomes. The more people see that the Iranians as the despite all the propaganda, as the Iranians as the protagonists, and them these regimes as the antagonists. These are not smart moves to show, to expose, to make open their relationship with the Israeli regime. These are stupid moves. But their complaints are not are not really important. The only thing that is important is Iran and the United States. No one else has a role to play. The Israeli regime, of course, because of its influence on the United States, because of Zionism, that is when I say the United States, I'm including the Israeli regime. But Israel is in its own has facing a lot of crises at home, and the problems that the regime, the internal crises, Netanyahu's problems, these are growing. It's becoming clear that the situation in Israel is not nearly as good as they they they've been presenting it to be. And of course, in Lebanon, they're being hit hard by Hezbollah. Extraordinary scenes coming from, and then of course they, in their rage, they go and bomb medics and they slaughter families. I mean, these Zionist monsters are they're exposing themselves to the world every day, even though Western media doesn't show any of this and they hide it because their journalists are all uh, complicit. But people are seeing what's going on. But it shows the regime. It's making it more despised, hated, of course, and it's showing the resistance being effective. So Israel has many problems. But at the end of the day, at the negotiating table, this is between Iran and the United States. And if the Israelis don't abide by the agreements between Iran and the United States, Iran will not fulfill its obligation. It won't happen. And we've already, you see, the difference between Iran today and before is that Iran is much more assertive and more confident. The public. Ayatollah Khamenei was always very confident. But you have different people. It's sort of like like it's very cold and someone wants to go into a pool or into water and they keep putting their toe in and they keep pulling back but once you jump into the pool, then you're in. The Iranians have always been under the threat of war. Now we're in war and Iranians see, wow, we've done much better than many Iranians. We're doing much better than we expected. Many, of course, were expecting victory. I always expected us to have to the resistance to win, just as I always expected Hezbollah to do well on the battlefield. And before, when they were saying Hezbollah severely weakened, I always rejected that. And here we're seeing uh, that we were right. So the Iranians are in a in the past, for example, with regard with when we had the JCPOA negotiations in 2015, the nuclear deal. The deal had significant flaws. The Iranians carried out their obligations very swiftly. The Americans didn't. Obama cheated Iran, and the Americans dragged their feet. And until the very end, when Trump left, Iran was not really benefiting from the JCPOA nearly as much as it was supposed to. The Central Bank of Iran could never uh, join the international banking system. The Americans cheated Iran. So now we saw in the ceasefire that when the Israelis said, when Netanyahu, in order to wreck the ceasefire, he carpet bombed Lebanon and slaughtered all these hundreds of innocent people just to wreck the ceasefire. And then Trump was saying, well, that Lebanon is not a part of the ceasefire. Iran said, no, no way. This is a part of the ceasefire. This is what we agreed upon, and you're not getting away with this. We're not going to open the Strait of Hormuz to the ships from those countries. This is the difference. In 2015, when they would not abide by their side of the bargain, the Iranians would show patience. This time, they're saying, we're not having any of that. You don't abide by your commitments. We don't abide by our commitments. If Netanyahu had not carpet bombed Beirut, this and then later, if Trump hadn't imposed the siege on Iranian ports, which was an an act of war and a violation of the ceasefire agreement, the Strait of Hormuz would have been open today. The global economic crisis, as is emerging, would not exist. It would have been much smaller and easier to. It would have had the war would have had a huge impact. I mean, 45 days of shutting you know the Strait of Hormuz being under those circumstances was going to have a big impact, but not nearly as bad as it is now. So Netanyahu and Trump, by violating the ceasefire, they've kept the Strait of Hormuz shut. This time round, therefore, the Iranians have shown that they will not tolerate the Americans cheating Iran at the negotiating table or cheating Iran in implementing any deal. So this is going to make negotiations tougher for the Americans right now, because the Iranians are going to say, well, if you don't do this, we're not going to do that. If you lie to us, if you cheat us, then we're going to make life difficult for you. We're going to make it hell for you. And Iran has the means because they have a powerful military and because they control the Strait of Hormuz.
We know that one of the main points in this negotiation is reparation of war. With the devastation that has happened since the war started, this war of aggression on Iran, and how does Iran see GCC countries and their participation in this war? How are they going to be charged because of the devastation, because of the destruction of the Iranian facilities, Iranian life, everything that the United States and Israel did to Iran is part of their responsibility as well. How is that going to be communicated between Iran and GCC countries?
Well, Iran will demand reparations in one way or another. Iran is going to get its reparations. It doesn't matter who pays, and the reparations will include Lebanon. Lebanon will have to be rebuilt, and the Israeli regime will have to leave. That's Without that happening, there's no deal. Without removing the siege on the Strait of Hormuz, without U.S. withdrawing forces, without the Israeli regime ending the genocide in Gaza and withdrawing from Lebanon, there won't be a peace. And so reparations is a part of that. Iran's sovereignty is a part of that. Peace across the region is all of these, will be a part of the negotiations. But Iran is not going to forgive and forget. That's not happening.
I think the case of the Strait of Hormuz and what has happened in the Persian Gulf, it brings how Iran is going to communicate with other nations, with the import and export. For example, when it comes to the Caspian Sea, what would change in the near future in the eyes of Iranians? And how is that going to change the trades between Iran and Russia, China, and the new lines of communication, the railroad, maybe the ports in the northern part of Iran? Is there any sort of plan on the part of the Iranian government to transform the way that they do the trade with other nations?
Oh, I think there's going to be a sea change. I think the north-south corridor between Iran and Russia is going to be uh, a top priority. The Belt and Road Initiative, the network that links Iran to Central Asia and to China, or through Pakistan and hypothetically Afghanistan, these are going to be not just top priorities for Iran, but for everyone, because the United States is the Trump regime is they're pirates, and the Chinese know that, the Iranians know that, everyone knows that. So Asian countries are going to definitely have an incentive to strengthen land routes and to strengthen trade by land in order to protect themselves from the United States. Of course, the United States will try to counter that by strengthening ISIS and Al Qaeda and other terrorist groups in Central Asia and elsewhere. That's been the plan for a long time. That's why they moved ISIS from Syria, elements of them to Afghanistan. But still, I think that as U.S. Uh, has shown itself to be a threat to uh, to sea trade, the priority for Iran to strengthen the land routes and for Iran's partners is has increased dramatically. You hear that, you see it a lot in Iranian media already, and the government is moving in that direction.
Yeah. Do you think that a new security architecture is shaping, considering Eurasia? Because we had Iranian foreign minister going to China, then Vladimir Putin. Right now, China is gonna go to North Korea. Mm, and there's some rumors they're talking about the new security architecture of Eurasia, which the Middle East, I would say the West Asia would be part of it, or what's going on in the Persian Gulf. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, maybe Pakistan. I don't know Turkey, how Turkey is playing right now. How do you see that? Is that far from being achieved, or it's going to be something that is workable for the time being?
It's difficult to say, in at least for our part of the world. I mean, Pakistan and Turkey are very close to Trump, and Turkey is, of course, NATO, and so its interests are in line with Trump's interests. The Pakistani government has good relations with China, but we know the internal politics of Pakistan, and it is close to the United States. The countries in the Persian Gulf, they are bound to the United States. Jordan, plays a very ugly role in all of the wars. I mean, it is, you know, seriously a tool. I mean, just simply a tool of the CIA and Mossad in our part of the world, whether it's in the dirty wars or in the wars against Iran, or it's, whatever the Israelis need, they'll get it from the Jordanian regime. But these countries in the Persian Gulf, they're all bound to the United States. I can't see them. I can't envisage them easily moving away. Their families have interest in the United States and in the West. That's where they're educated. That's where probably they have lots of Epstein videos. There are probably lots of Epstein videos of the princes and the princesses and the elites there. I mean, imagine. And something that people should be very careful of, especially pro-Palestinian activists. They should be very careful about these things. I'm sure that the Mossad and the CIA and the Western intelligence agencies, MI6 and others, MI5, they're out there to get dirt on people. But in any case, these regimes are deeply bound to the West, and I can't really envisage them. I can understand them moving to improve relations with China, with Russia, with Iran, but up to a point. Up to a point. I don't see them, because they're proxies. They're bound to the West. So unless there's upheaval and change, which is quite possible, especially if there's war, then that would change the equation. But I do believe we are moving towards change, whether anyone likes it or not. The balance of power. This war has changed the global balance of power. And again, if we go back to what Robert Kagan wrote, I think this is not some, uh, you know, um, no minority view. I mean, when the godfather of the neocons acknowledges this is the greatest defeat of the United States ever, and it's going to have a huge impact. And these countries in the region, their importance is decreased a lot. The countries in the Persian Gulf, they're not what they were, 3 months ago, or at least what they imagined themselves to be. It's never going to be like before. They made a big mistake. They made a catastrophic mistake, a criminal. What they did was criminal and barbaric, but it was a major, major miscalculation. They misread the situation, and so I think that the region is going to change, but I don't think it's going to be. I don't think they want to be a part of a non-American project. I mean, Turkey. I mean, Erdogan has been in power in Turkey for God knows how long, and over 2 decades. and he's still in NATO. He hasn't budged, and he's transporting oil to Netanyahu throughout the genocide, throughout the wars. We shouldn't be naive about these things. Some, I doesn't reflect upon the people of Turkey. No one. Sometimes some of my Turkish friends say, "Why are you, so critical of Turkey?" I'm not critical of Turkey. I mean, I've been told by a non-Kuwaiti, a Westerner in Kuwait, that during the war, Kuwaitis were cheering for Iran. Not like a minority in Kuwait. Kuwaitis, I was told, were cheering for Iranians. Now, what he said is based on his own anecdotal. He's in Kuwait, or at least he was in Kuwait. I don't know about right now, but um, maybe from his anecdotal experience. But it's not a huge country. But he was saying that people were so it doesn't. I'm not when I say the Kuwaiti regime. I'm not talking about the population. We know that these regimes are police states, and so popular opinion in the Emirates. I have no doubt that ordinary Emiratis are against the Israeli regime. I have no doubt about that. But it is a police state, and it's very tightly controlled. In Turkey, you see like people come to the streets and to support the Palestinians. People are unhappy about the trade relations, but Turkey is still in NATO.
Just moments ago, we've learned that Israel is bombing the southern part of Lebanon again and again and again, each and every day. They're killing civilians. And the same thing has happened yesterday and the day before in Syria as well. What is the position of Turkey? Is that going to bring, because Turkey has a lot to do with the case of Syria. We know that Iran is concerned about the people in Syria and with the case of Lebanon. Is that going to bring Turkey and Iran to the same sort of, some sort of understanding with Israeli objectives? Because they're attacking each and every country in that region. And it doesn't seem that in a long run they can continue this way. And Turkey is going to, are they concerned about Syria? The people, I'm talking about the people in Syria, or all they care about the government to keep the government, in its position.
Well, if Ankara was to change policy, Iran would cooperate. The problem is not in Tehran; it's in Ankara. So they are concerned, but they're bound to the West. The elites are bound to the West, and they work in line with broader Western objectives. As we speak, again, they're transporting Baku oil to Netanyahu. You would imagine that Turkey would have broken off relations over the last 2.5 years, even political relations. They refused to do that. Iran encouraged them to do that. They refused. And when these countries in our region refuse to do that sort of thing, it makes it much more difficult to convince other countries outside of the region, in Africa and Latin America and Asia, to do the same. You first have to do it yourselves. But none of these countries made any move. Syria is the result of the coming to power of ISIS and Al Qaeda in Syria. Is exactly what Iran and Hezbollah was saying would happen. Should anyone be surprised that Jolani is obedient to the United States? If Jolani was, it was only about jihad and all the billions of dollars were pouring in, and the ISIS and the Al Qaeda head choppers, as some would call them, they're all being funded only until now. Now, where's the funding? Where's the support? Why don't they continue to fund these people so that they can take back southern Syria? As Hezbollah's fighting, this is the best time for the Syrians to fight for their territory, because the Israelis would be overwhelmed. They're fighting, they can't defeat Hezbollah, and if the Syrians, which are a much larger country, were to open a front, then the Israelis would be in a lot of trouble. They're not going to do that. That was never the plan. Those people who promoted the blessed revolution, they're always working for the CIA, knowingly or otherwise. They're always working for the Mossad. Even those who are pro-Palestinian, they're always working for the Mossad, wittingly or unwittingly. Some wittingly, some unwittingly. They're always on the Qatari money and you know uh, we all knew it. This was never about Assad. They like to say it that way in order to muddy the waters. From the very beginning, it was clear what this was all about. It was to break the axis of resistance so that the Israelis could defeat the Palestinians, so that the Israelis could uh, have more ease in its expansionist policies. If they were sincere, they should defend their territory now. They were all about jihad, whatever that means. And of course, jihad for us is very different from the jihad of the ISIS and Al Qaeda terrorists backed by the CIA. We have a our worldview is for us. I was just saying the other day to someone. I said, from our religious and ideological perspective, if the Jews in Israel were in Gaza and the Palestinians were in control of Palestine, and they were doing to the Jews in Gaza what the Zionists are doing today to the Palestinians, Iran's policy would be to support the Jews in Gaza. It would be just as it is now. Why? Because that is the moral position to take, and supporting the empire or working to strengthen the empire, pushing the policies of the empire are immoral. Iran's support for the Syrians was because it knew that ISIS and Al Qaeda is to the benefit of the United States, and it is to the detriment of the Palestinian people and people across the region. But if right now Jolani decided to shift policy and say, I'm going to defend my territory, the first country to come to his aid would be Iran. It would be Hezbollah that sends its advisors there to help him. It would be the resistance in Iraq that volunteers. And no one else would help him. Have no doubt. All those billions of dollars that came in to create this dirty war to destroy Syria, none of that will come in. Just as it's not being given to them now, it won't come in. If somehow miraculously Jolani decided that he'd be the anti-Jolani, he will be independent of the empire. The first to support him would be Iran and Hezbollah and the resistance. They would be there immediately. They would give him whatever he needs to liberate the country. But that was never the intention in the first place. And I think people have woken up to that. Those who still close their eyes, they know why they're closing. It's because they're on the payroll. It's because of sectarian blindness. A disease in itself. The disinformation that they spread out every day it shows why that disinformation it's obvious why it's being spread, because they have to keep the waters muddy. Because if the water is not muddy, then everyone will see more clearly what's happening. But people are seeing much more than before.
I don't
So
know if it's
Turkey is, if it's in its interest to join Iran, but it's for Ankara to make that decision. If Ankara had joined Iran, if it joins Iran today, it would be horrible for the Israeli regime.
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen. Not under Erdogan.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
That's something I never understood. Why is that? I think I see no reason for Iran and Turkey not to participate, not to cooperate,
because Western intelligence agencies, they helped Mr. Erdogan. They helped him, and Turkish intelligence at that time, they helped him. The Islamic movement in Turkey under Najmuddin Erbakan was a very different thing, and they were able to change the course of much of the movement in a way in which someone or people much less threatening to the empire came to power. But if the original, if someone like Najmuddin Erdogan was able to gain power and he was removed through a coup, but if he was able, or someone like him was able to gain power in Turkey, uh, we would have a very different Turkey today, and the Israelis would be in a lot of trouble. So it's not as if Turkey is like this. This is it's just like Jordan. Do you think like ordinary Jordan, and the Jordanian regime is a horrible proxy regime? But do you think Jordanians are happy about it?
Mm.
No, of course.
Yeah. Professor Man, before wrapping up, we've learned in the last 2 days more than 36 tankers pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Who are these countries that are getting their tankers to pass through the Strait of Hormuz? And are they paying directly to Iran? Are they communicating? How is the payment system? Is that in Iranian rial? Is in America? Is in Chinese yuan or something else? How is that gonna? How is that working?
They all pay, and there are different means to have it done. It can be done in different ways. There, uh, there's not a single method,
Yeah.
but all of them they belong to countries that are not showing hostility towards Iran.
Yeah.
That's the key point. Remember, as I said on multiple occasions, Iran never at any point closed the Strait of Hormuz. Never. Only those countries that were hostile towards Iran, that helped the United States murder Iranian kids in Minab, to murder our leader, to bomb gymnasiums where those girls were playing volleyball and they massacred all of them. I think it was like a city in the south of Iran, Lar, maybe, I'm not sure, but I should remember these things. But I mean, they carried all sorts of atrocities, and which is unforgivable. And it's not the first time that they've done this. They helped ISIS and Al Qaeda. Before that, they helped Saddam Hussein invade Iran. But but countries that were friendly to Iran, it was never close to them, and the ships that pass through, they pay a fee. There are different mechanisms and ways to do it, or different there are different ways which that fee can be paid. But they are countries that have some sort of friendly relationship with Iran. They're not implicated in the war. The goods may have been from like these five countries in some cases. They were purchased and they're stuck in the Persian Gulf. They're facilitating their departure.